My name is Zinnia, 32 years old, and I'm the founder and CEO of an educational technology company based in Boston. But that night, in the gilded grand ballroom of the hotel where my parents' 40th wedding anniversary was being held, no one mentioned that. No one asked how I was living, what I was doing, or whether I was okay. I stood at the edge of the family photo, barely caught in the light. Then my mother turned to the photographer, her voice light, as if stating the obvious. Take one of just the three of us and Ryan. Three, not four. I was told to step aside. I stood there as the shutter clicked, applause rang out, and relatives' eyes slid away from mine. The whole room went silent for a moment, then picked up again, with laughter and chatter as if nothing had happened. Have you ever felt erased from the very family you once poured your heart into holding together? If you've ever been treated like an outsider in the home where you grew up, share your feelings in the comments. Hit like if this struck a chord with you, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear the full story, because right after that moment, I uncovered a secret they had hidden from me nearly my whole life. Are you ready to step into that truth with me? I can still hear the camera's shutter echoing in my ears as my hand tightened unconsciously on the strap of my purse. That photo of three people, without me, taken only minutes earlier, felt like invisible scissors cutting me away from what little was left of the fabric of this family. I turned and walked toward the bar, the place where few people paid attention. A waltz played softly, but it couldn't mask the booming laughter from the center of the room, where Ryan stood among the crowd, waving his hands while telling a story that didn't matter, yet still earned him a proud pat on the back from my father. My mother stood close, eyes glowing as if Ryan were a prince returning from some great victory. Ryan's turquoise McLaren had been parked at the hotel entrance just as I arrived. The valet handed over the keys while my mother rushed out, waving like a devoted fan. My father followed, dressed in a crisp gray suit, embracing Ryan tightly as though they hadn't seen each other in years, though just last week I'd seen my father post a photo of Ryan surfing in Miami on social media. And me? I stepped out of a rented black sedan because my car was in the shop. I carried my own bags inside. No one asked how I was. No hugs. Just a curt nod from my father and a dry greeting from my mother. Oh, you're here. We start in 10 minutes. Don't use the wrong entrance to the ballroom. I smiled politely, as always, though deep inside I wanted to turn around and leave right then. The Plaza Warwick Hotel in downtown Boston was where my parents had once held their engagement party nearly 40 years earlier. They rented the exact same grand ballroom, laid down fresh red carpet, hung chandeliers, and decorated every table with hundreds of white orchids. Everything was flawless, expensive, extravagant, just my mother's style. But the weight of it all pressed down on the air, thickened by hollow compliments, clinking glasses, and the calculating eyes of relatives I only saw on holidays. I walked to the seating chart. Handwritten calligraphy shimmered before me, each guest carefully arranged with royal-like precision. I scanned for my name, table 18. At the far end of the room, next to the server's entrance. Meanwhile, Ryan sat at the central table with my parents, beneath glittering chandeliers, facing the main stage. My seat was shoved against the wall where servers carried trays of food hidden from the live band, with only the clash of dishes from the kitchen as background. We wanted you near the Hendersons, my mother whispered as I passed by, eyes still glued to her phone. They're looking for a tech consultant. How thoughtful, I replied, voice soft as a breeze. She didn't notice the edge in my tone. I sat on a slightly crooked, silk-covered chair. Everything sparkled: lights, wine glasses, strangers' smiles. But all I felt was gray heaviness. At the central table, Ryan launched into stories of his Dubai trip, insisting, a 7-star hotel isn't worth the hype. Laughter filled the room. My father proudly introduced him as a young investor building the next-gen blockchain platform. No one mentioned my company, the one that had just signed a contract with the California Department of Education to roll out a new online learning system to more than 200 public schools. Maybe they didn't know, or maybe they chose silence. I spotted Aunt Ruth 2 tables away. When I caught her gaze, she gave a small nod, eyes heavy with regret. A few others looked quickly away. No one came close. Miss Zinnia, a soft voice spoke beside me. A young server, barely 20, held a tray. Would you like your appetizer now? The chef says your table's course is ready, but everyone's still listening to the speeches. I nodded. Thank you. She smiled, genuine, warm, and for a moment I realized that the smile of a stranger can feel kinder than 100 hollow compliments from relatives who share your last name. I swirled my wine glass, watching the light scatter into thin streaks on the glass. My mind spun with questions. Was I being too sensitive? Or had I been so used to carrying everything alone that I forgot even I deserved to be seen? Then my father's voice boomed through the microphone. And now, to celebrate 40 years together, we'd like to present a small gift to the child who has always made us most proud, Ryan. Hundreds of eyes turned as my mother held out a sleek black box with the Patek Philippe logo gleaming. Ryan opened it. Inside lay a platinum watch. Stage lights caught on its surface, blazing like an unspoken proclamation. Here is the chosen one. I lifted my glass and drank, the wine bitterer than anything I had ever tasted. But my face remained calm, that skill I'd honed nearly my whole life. As Ryan gave his speech, I sat still, etching every detail into memory, because I knew one thing for certain: this invisibility wouldn't last forever. And at that moment, as the spotlight shone on my brother's radiant smile, something shifted deep inside me, a silent quake. The faint outline of a new beginning, as steady as the pulse quickening in my chest. Applause surged like waves, cold against my skin. My mother placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder, her eyes shining as if she'd witnessed a miracle. My father, in his practiced, resonant tone, spoke to the crowd with carefully measured emotion. We have lived 40 years together, building a home, careers, and raising 2 children. But if we must name the greatest pride of our lives, it is Ryan the child who proves we did it right. I heard every word. Ryan, he continued, patting my brother's back, always brings light. Whether in investments, charity work, or simply the smile that brightens a room. Every step you take, we believe in you. More applause. Some guests stood. My mother dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, overwhelmed with pride. I sat motionless, my glass half empty, its taste gone. What I felt wasn't sorrow, nor anger, it was withdrawal, as though my mind retreated into a locked chamber, apart from the noise. And tonight, my father pressed on, we want to give Ryan one more gift to mark this milestone. I saw my mother bend beneath the table, pulling out a long black leather case, gleaming under the lights like polished coal. The Patek Philippe logo shone as she lifted it with both hands. Gasps rippled. Even the band missed a beat. Ryan opened it with his usual confidence. Inside rested another platinum watch, minimal face, second-hand thin as silver thread, sapphire crown glinting. I didn't need anyone to tell me its worth, not just in money, but in message. My mother smiled into the microphone. This is a special design. We hope Ryan will wear it as he enters the next chapter of life, a reminder that he is not just the present, but the future of this family. Cameras clicked. Applause thundered again. A guest whispered near me. Beautiful, truly deserved. Deserved. I showed no reaction. My hand rested on the rim of my glass, eyes fixed past ivory flowers lining the tables. Surrounded by candles and chatter, I felt like background blur in someone else's memory. No one asked about me. or the company I'd built with my youth. No one mentioned San Francisco last month when Forbes named me to the 30 under 30 list. I remembered that night vividly. I stood on stage in a hall full of founders, investors, scholars, students. After my talk, a girl ran up for an autograph, telling me our online learning software had helped her rebuild her math skills during the pandemic. I smiled, cried, and felt meaning. No one from my family was there. My mother texted one line, "Busy tonight, good luck." Ryan sent a fireworks sticker, nothing more. I blinked away that image. Ryan was speaking now. Honestly, I don't know what to say except thank you. Thank you for believing in me even when others thought I wasn't ready. Maybe success isn't about getting everything right, it's about having someone who always stands behind you. Eyes turned again toward my parents. Someone whispered, "What amazing parents raising such a son." I looked away toward the tall windows opening onto the hotel's garden. Yellow light stretched across green lawns like a hazy veil. A breeze stirred silk curtains, carrying the faint scent of orange blossoms. I pulled out my phone, reopened the Forbes email. The subject line still shone quietly. "Congratulations, Zinnia Caldwell, you made it." And I had, alone, without a luxury watch, without applause, without the crackly family stage. So why did my chest still ache? I slipped the phone away, stood, and walked from the table. No one noticed. Even the empty chair seemed not to leave a gap, just another forgotten piece of a party that wasn't meant for me. I stepped into the hall, where the light was softer, the air easier to breathe. My heels clicked on marble tiles, blending with faint waltz music drifting from the ballroom. Something shifted in my chest. Quiet, unhurried, but certain. I rested my hand on the cool stone railing. My palm was cold, but steady. I had sat still long enough. When the host called family members up for official photos, I was still in the hallway, hand gliding over cold marble, seeking balance. My mother's heels tapped closer, her voice light as air but sharp enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We'll take the official photo now. Photographer, please." Just the three of us and Ryan. A sudden hush swept through the room, like music cut off right at its peak. I was still a few steps away. No one called me forward. No one turned to ask if I wanted to stand with them. I saw my mother tilt her head, smiling at the photographer, smoothing the hem of her dress before taking my father's hand. Ryan stepped in between them, one hand in his pocket, the other draped casually over my mother's shoulder. The flash burst, slicing through the space like a blade. I stood frozen, my feet unable to move, as though the floor beneath me had thickened, dragging me down without warning. Relatives lingered along the sides. Aunt Ruth frowned, fingers twisting a string of pearls, then quickly turned away. Uncle Peter bent to retrieve a napkin from the floor, though nothing had fallen. Someone coughed softly. Another gave a faint, dismissive laugh. No one stepped in to disturb the picture-perfect arrangement. I heard whispers behind me. Maybe they just wanted the traditional one parents with their son. That'll be the main one to hang in the house. I'm sure they'll take another with the whole family later. But no one invited me back. There was no later. A tall, lean man with streaked gray hair stood nearby, his face familiar. It took me a moment to place him, Richard Lowen, the older investor who once attended one of my pitch sessions in New York 3 years ago. He had sat silent the entire time, only approaching at the end to shake my hand, telling me that my eyes reminded him of his late sister who had also been pushed aside by her family. Richard was watching me now. He didn't speak, but his gaze weighed heavier than any words of comfort. I slipped out through the side door, down the quiet hall, then turned toward the stairwell that led to the hotel's back terrace. I sat on a stone bench beside blooming rose bushes, my hands still trembling. In the cool night air, The scent of expensive perfumes from the ballroom clung faintly to my clothes. The soft scrape of heels on tile came from the glass doors. Sarah appeared wearing a pale lavender dress, clutching a small purse. She had been my closest friend in high school, sleeping over at my house dozens of times, sharing everything from shoes to our first secrets. But she had gone off to college far away, while I crossed the country to build my career, and our connection faded like ink bleeding in the rain. I saw everything, she said, settling beside me. No one should do that. Not to their daughter. I pressed my lips together, silent. Every reaction inside me had been forced down beneath a thick shell, as if one word would cause everything to break apart. Sarah laid a hand over mine. Are you okay? I shook my head slightly. Not really. But I won't let them see me shattered. She gave a sad smile. You don't have to keep holding it all in. Who could stand being treated like that? I sighed, leaning against the bench. My mother used to say family is where you never have to prove yourself. But clearly, I've never qualified for a place in the photo on the living room wall. Sarah stayed quiet. After a moment, she pulled a silver hair clip from her purse, the kind we used to wear in school, and fastened it into my hair as if by instinct. You know, she murmured, I used to think Ryan was just a harmless flirt, but I was wrong. The way your whole family revolves around him, it gave me chills. I let out a low, humorless laugh. You're not the only one who thought that. Everyone sees Ryan as the default heir. They only see him. And you? I'm the footnote, if I'm mentioned at all. Sarah sighed. I know tonight's a big occasion, but if you want to leave, I'll drive. I don't want you sitting there listening to their stories like you're behind glass. I nodded, but instead of standing, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through emails. The Forbes notification was still there. The invite from the education conference in Seattle. A message from my assistant. Arizona's Department of Education had just approved our new contract. Out there, I was someone. Only here did I vanish. A bell rang faintly from inside. Someone was calling guests to cut the cake. Sarah squeezed my hand again. It's your choice, but I'll stand with you, whether you're in that photo or not. I looked at her, then turned toward the glass doors glowing with the party's light. Their roles were already cast. I was the extra. But inside me, another thought grew. Maybe I didn't need to force my way into their script. Maybe it was time to create a stage of my own where I held the camera, where I chose who belonged in the frame. After leaving the hotel, I didn't return to my apartment in Beacon Hill. Though the night had grown colder and Boston's early autumn chill was sinking in, I drove straight south across the Longfellow Bridge, through tree-lined streets to my parents' old house in Cambridge. No call ahead, no warning. The old key was still in. My wallet, partly because no one had ever asked for it back, partly because they likely never imagined I would return. The house sat in silence. No car in the garage, meaning they hadn't returned yet or were still seeing off guests. I stepped inside, where the scent of old wood polish and lavender lingered. Nothing had changed. The antique pendulum clock still ticked above the fireplace. Their silver wedding photo frame still gleamed on the bookshelf. I climbed the stairs, along a burgundy carpeted hallway, stopping at the door that once bore a wooden plaque carved with my name, Zinnia. The plaque was gone. In its place hung a new one, Ryan's legacy room. I opened the door. My room, or what had once been mine, was now unrecognizable. The lavender wallpaper I'd chosen years ago was replaced with silver gray paint. The bookshelf that once held comic books and presentation notes now displayed football trophies, plaques for outstanding athletic achievement, and photos of Ryan with venture capital CEOs I'd never heard of. The desk where I had written my college thesis until 2 a.m. had been turned into a display for watches, colognes, and a glass case of medals engraved in gold. honoring Ryan Caldwell, inspiration of a new generation. I stepped inside as though wandering into a stranger's museum. Yet this was the room where I had buried countless dreams. I opened the closet. Everything inside was neatly arranged in my mother's style. Suits hung separately, shoes polished, shirts folded crisply. In the corner, lower down, was a smaller compartment I had never noticed. Its paint was chipped. The hinges creaked as I pulled it open. Behind it was a black safe with an old-fashioned combination dial. I knelt, pressing my palm against the cold metal. A set of numbers came to me almost instantly. My grandmother's birth year, 1907. I turned the dial, sweat beading on my palms. A faint click. The door swung open. Inside lay a bundle of documents tied with deep red ribbon and a thick envelope with faded blue ink across the front. For Zinnia, only open when you are ready. My hands trembled as I lifted the envelope. Inside was a 2-page handwritten letter, each word carefully penned, the ink faded but intact. Dearest Zinnia, if you are reading this, then perhaps something has happened to make you question your place in this family as I once did many years ago. And if that time has come, I want you to understand one thing. You are not crazy, you are not overly sensitive, and you are not less than what they made you believe. I paused, throat tight. It took a deep breath to keep reading. I was the woman on the sidelines of every conversation, every decision, every family meal. Your grandfather was kind, but not everyone in his family was. I stayed silent too long, until I realized that if I didn't protect myself, my children and grandchildren would face the same fate. You are my blood, the light I never dared to fully live. But you are doing what I could not. For that, I prepared something for you. Beneath these papers are all the documents for the trust I established before I passed, bearing one name only, yours. Not to sever you from family, but so that, when the time comes, you can choose your own place. No one else will decide it for you. Do not tell them unless you are truly ready. Those who need to know will know. Those who refuse to see you grow will try to deny everything you've done. But do not be afraid. In this safe is also my personal journal and another letter I left for Mr. Abernathy, my asset manager at Fulton and Green Bank. Read everything carefully and reach out if needed. You have time, and you have the right to decide what is enough. With all my love, Margaret Evelyn Walsh, your grandmother. I sat stunned, the letter resting in my lap. The room was so quiet I could hear the wall clock ticking each second. I hadn't touched the documents yet, but her words alone had cracked something open in me. Not because of money or inheritance, but because I felt seen, trusted, acknowledged in the deepest silence. She had seen it all. I gathered the bundle of files, clutching them to my chest, and walked out as though carrying something sacred. I switched off the light and closed the door, not locked. But I left no sign I had ever returned. The drive back to Boston passed in silence, the steady hum of the engine and yellow streetlights sliding across the glass. Against my chest, the letter pressed close to my heart like an unspoken promise. The next morning, as the pale autumn sun touched the windows of my Mount Vernon apartment, I received an unexpected call. The name on the screen, Aunt Caroline. My mother's cousin, who had occasionally taken my side during tense family moments but never deeply involved herself. I hesitated before answering. Zinnia. Her voice dropped after the usual greetings. I don't mean to intrude, but there's something you should know. Something that can't stay hidden any longer. My grip on the phone tightened. What is it? It's about the house in Martha's Vineyard and a very large loan your parents took out. But the primary guarantor listed is you. I froze. Can you explain? I only stumbled on it during a church council meeting. Someone I know at National Eastside Bank mentioned the Caldwell name on a list of assets under risk review. I got curious, asked more questions, and Your name appeared on the second mortgage records. I rose from my chair, walking to the window, my hand shaking. Are you certain you saw my name? Not just your name, she whispered. Your signature. It looked exactly like yours. I closed my eyes. A dull throb pulsed at my temples. Can you get me a copy? I already took photos. Sending them now. Her message came within a minute, with a PDF attachment. I opened it. There it was, a secondary mortgage of more than $2.7 million against the very property my parents owned on the island, the family retreat each summer, though I hadn't been invited since college. My name appeared as co-signer. Beneath it, a signature nearly identical to the one I used on every business contract. But I had never signed a thing related to that house. I collapsed into a chair, my eyes still locked on the screen. One question pounded in my head. If I was legally bound to a massive loan without even knowing it, what would happen if they defaulted? I didn't need to imagine far. I had seen young companies crumble because a personal mortgage tied to a CEO's name ruined their credibility. One leak, one small headline in the paper, startup CEO tangled in family debt, would be enough to scare investors away. I called Natalie, my head of legal, who had once worked as an attorney for an international investment firm in New York before moving into ed tech. She picked up after 2 rings. I'm sending you a document right now, I said. I need you to check the legality of this signature. How urgent? She asked crisply. It directly impacts my reputation and personal assets. Possibly the company too. I'm online now. Only 10 minutes later, Natalie called back. Her voice was steady, low. Zinnia, this is a forged signature, but it's extremely well done. If I didn't compare it against the authenticated samples I keep, it would be hard to detect. My grip on the phone tightened. Could they use this to saddle me with that debt if something goes wrong? If you don't officially dispute it within 3 months of the signing date, Massachusetts law allows the bank to consider it valid unless you countersue for fraud. And the signing date was 2.5 months ago. I shot to my feet. You need to immediately sign a formal objection and file it with the bank, she continued. Then I'll help you draft a petition for an internal investigation on the lender's side. And if you agree, I can reach out to Mr. Abernathy directly. I froze for a moment. That name flared like a spark. Abernathy, the one my grandmother had mentioned in her letter. Her private asset manager, trustworthy, and if I remembered correctly, his office was near Beacon Street. Contact him right away, I said, and prepare an additional file in case we have to take this to court. After that call, I drove across the river. Abernathy's office was on the 6th floor of a stately red brick building with a copper dome and moss green carpet lining the halls. The receptionist recognized me immediately. Miss Zinnia, he's expecting you. I stepped in. The wooden door closed softly behind me, carrying a strange weight. Abernathy looked older than I remembered, his hair entirely silver now, but his eyes were sharp, alert. Zinnia, he said with a smile. I assume you've read Margaret's letter. I sat, nodding. And now I need to understand everything she prepared. He pulled out a thick file, opening it section by section as though it had been waiting. She didn't leave you assets only out of affection. She knew the day would come when the girl she loved would have to protect herself from her own bloodline. The words echoed inside me like slow bells. I felt I wasn't alone in this fight. I chose to call first, not out of politeness, but so they couldn't later claim I had stormed into the house to make a scene. After everything, I no longer had patience for their excuses. My mother answered on the second ring. Her tone was calm, the same one she used for the press. Zinnia, I was about to call you. You left the party without a word, and the guests kept asking. I need to see you both tonight. I cut in, my voice level but unyielding. Not to talk about the party. To clarify matters involving assets, forged signatures, and debts in my name that I never agreed to. Silence on the line for a few seconds. Well, she replied cautiously. Fine. Tonight, 7 o'clock. The old house. I arrived on time. My father sat in the living room, wine glass in hand, eyes fixed on the financial news channel. My mother emerged from the kitchen, beige evening dress immaculate. Ryan was absent, or not yet home. "Hello, dear," she said as though nothing required attention. I set my bag down, unzipped it, and drew out the folder from the law office. "Documents from the bank, from legal counsel, and from Mr. Abernathy," I said, eyes locked on my father. "They confirm the signature was forged. The Martha's Vineyard mortgage lists my name. I never agreed, never signed." "Who did this?" My father finally looked away from the TV, setting his glass down. "You're too tense, Zinnia. It was a temporary solution. It won't affect you if things go smoothly." "Won't affect me?" I repeated, tilting my head. "A loan of nearly $3 million under my name. And you think it won't affect me? What about the company? My reputation? Investor confidence?" My mother pressed a finger to her temple. "You're overreacting. Family is about sharing burdens. Ryan is building a blockchain platform with huge potential. We only wanted to ensure he had support in the early stage." "So you used my name?" I asked, fury tightening my chest. "Forged my signature, then stayed silent as though it meant nothing?" My father folded his arms, his tone sharpening. "You carry the Caldwell name. Your success comes from these roots. The house, your education, the foundation, the connections. You didn't rise alone." I laughed, cold and sharp. "I didn't ask you to pay for college, full scholarship. Every loan I took, I repaid myself. I never had an apartment in New York bought by you like Ryan, nor a sports car every time his startups collapsed." My mother sat slowly, eyes locked on mine. "You've always been strong. We knew you'd manage on your own. Ryan isn't like that. He needs more. And as his sister, you should understand sometimes the stronger one must sacrifice to lift the family." Ice crawled through my spine. "Sacrifice," I repeated. "Have you ever once sacrificed for me?" "When I spent 2 years alone in San Jose, crammed into a room half the size of your garage, fighting to launch my first project. When I got sick, working 16 hours a day just to keep it alive. When Forbes named me to the 30 under 30, did anyone here send congratulations?" No one spoke. Only the wall clock ticked, punctuating the silence. My mother's lips tightened. "You may not agree, but think bigger. That loan is giving Ryan the chance to carry through a promising venture. If it succeeds, the whole family benefits." "And if it fails?" I asked. My father's brow lifted. "You don't believe in your own family?" "I believe in law, in legitimate signatures, in my right to choose. If you call that a lack of faith, so be it." I placed Natalie's prepared legal notice on the table. "I've signed a formal disclaimer of any liability tied to that loan, and I will demand a full investigation from the bank. If necessary, I will sue for forgery and misuse of my personal information." My father shot up. "You'd disgrace us like this?" "No," I said evenly. "I'm protecting what I've built with my own time and strength. If that shames anyone, that's their problem, not mine." My mother leaned back, eyes calculating. "You're breaking everything apart," she murmured. "What we've built will never be the same." "Maybe that's for the best," I answered, "because I've never seen it as healthy." I gathered the papers back into my bag and stood. I didn't come to apologize or to beg. I came to make it clear. From today, nothing involving me will ever again be decided by someone else. I turned toward the door, hand gripping the cold metal knob. Behind me, no one spoke. No plea, no call. Only silence, heavy as stone. the kind I'd learned to step through long ago. I left my parents' house with the stillness of a frozen lake. No tears, no trembling, no rage, only a cold clarity. Driving back, I switched my phone to airplane mode. I didn't want excuses nor half-hearted apologies dressed up as family sacrifice. That night, from my 13th floor office overlooking Boston's glowing skyline, an email appeared with a simple subject line: Richard Lowen, something you should know. I opened it. Short, direct lines filled the screen. Zinnia, I don't wish to intrude on your personal life, but I saw what happened at the hotel. And I think you should know. I was very close to Margaret, your grandmother, whose eyes you carry. If you're willing to talk, call me during business hours. I believe she left you more than a letter. Richard, I stared at the message for several minutes, silent. Then I opened my contacts, found his number from last year's investment conference. Richard Lowen, he answered on the third ring, his voice low, steady. You've read the letter. Yes, I said. And I agree to meet. We arranged for the next morning at a small cafe on Charles Street, where Richard said he read the paper daily, a habit he refused to give up despite technology. When I arrived, he was already seated, navy coat, gray-checked scarf, sharp eyes behind horn-rimmed glasses. Zinnia, he smiled lightly. You have Margaret's eyes. Steady and silent, like someone standing before fire. I sat across from him. She never told me about you, because when she was alive, you were too young to grasp the bigger things. But she once told me something I never forgot. He paused, then spoke slowly. If the day comes when family is no longer safe, for Zinnia, I want her to have at least one adult in her corner. I couldn't reply. My chest felt like a stone had been placed upon it. She sensed something wasn't right, though she never said it outright, Richard continued. In her final year, she called me to Fulton and Green Bank to co-sign a confirmation of trust control to block any improper interference from other family members. I hold no power to decide, but enough to protect its legality. I looked at him, stunned by how thoroughly she had prepared. Now I need advice, I said. My parents used my name for a mortgage, forged my signature, and are funneling money into shell companies tied to Ryan. He nodded. I know they've been in trouble. An old associate of mine refused to partner with Ryan because of a lack of transparency. But if your assets are tied, you must act with structure, not emotion. I pulled out my tablet, showing him the financial web Natalie had been tracking. I have legal support. She just uncovered questionable transfers from my parents' accounts into new corporations formed in the past 3 months, registered in Delaware and Wyoming, all connected to an investment fund called Evernorth Solutions, fronted by Ryan's close friend. Richard studied the screen, his eyes sharp with focus. So they're using the label of technology development to pool capital. Funds like that are often created to dodge taxes or worse, to mask illicit money. I curled my fingers into my palm. If my company gets dragged into this, every single investor will walk. I'm working with public schools across 3 states. I can't have one line in a report linking us to a shell company. Richard thought for a moment. You need to freeze your parents' financial influence, even if that means putting them on the bank's watch list. And you need to review every asset Margaret left behind, including anything outside the trust. They may be trying to reach it through other channels. I nodded. I've started already. Now, I need to make it official that I am the sole legal decision maker for my grandmother's trust. His gaze was steady. They will come after you. Not only with anger, but with guilt, with fake pity, with phrases like family is everything. I'm not afraid anymore, I said firmly. He placed a hand gently over mine. Then Margaret chose the right person. I left the cafe with a heavier file in hand, certified copies from Fulton and Green Bank, bearing signatures from Richard Lowen and my grandmother's legal advisor a decade earlier. That afternoon, Natalie sent me a short message. confirmed 3 shell companies. Money washed through linked accounts. Tax evasion signs. Want me to forward to federal? I replied instantly, not yet. Wait until I see Abernathy again. I knew before bringing this to light, I needed to brace for the storm. But this time, I wasn't standing alone. More importantly, I held the cards they never thought I had. I arrived at the meeting room exactly on time, not a minute early, not a second late. The law office, where my parents arranged the so-called family gathering, was on the 8th floor of a gleaming glass tower in Boston's financial district, its polished walls reflecting even the faintest insincerity. I stepped into the elevator, each floor passed beating against my chest, not from fear, but from knowing exactly what awaited me behind that wooden door. They hadn't called me here to apologize. They had never known how. The secretary guided me to a long conference room, high ceilings, heavy drapes, a glossy oak table. My father sat at the head, in his familiar gray suit. My mother to his right, makeup flawless, eyes fixed on her phone. Ryan was already there, lounging sideways in a pale blue shirt with the collar undone, his usual air of indifference intact. Their lawyer, a composed middle-aged man named Marcus Crane, had a reputation in investment circles for handling quiet internal transfers that never reached the press. Zinnia, my father nodded as I sat. Thank you for coming. I didn't respond. I laid out my notebook and pen, neatly, opening the file in my bag. Marcus began. Today, we'd like to discuss a reasonable solution to secure the financial future of the Caldwell family, as well as assets tied to Whiteleaf Education, which Miss Zinnia currently runs. My mother interjected smoothly, her tone like small talk. Your company is doing well. But if you share a portion of control, transfer a symbolic shareholding to the family, everyone can help you more with external relations. Your father and Ryan both have strong investor connections. I looked straight at her. Are those the same investors Ryan set up shell companies to funnel money to? Ryan stiffened, color rising in his face. My father leaned forward. You're distorting things, he said, voice low. Those companies are stepping stones for Ryan to enter new markets. And, building a business takes time. I know the exact timing of each transaction, I replied, sliding through the evidence Natalie had compiled on my tablet. On the 12th of last month, the first transfer. On the 25th, 2 shell companies registered in Delaware. Every transfer routed through your personal accounts that never declared supplemental income. My mother's face stayed calm, but her hands on the table tightened. So you came here today to expose your family? No, I said clearly. I came to say I already know everything, and if anyone in this room intends to touch my company again, think twice. Marcus interjected quickly. Miss Zinnia, we prepared a draft. Non-binding, just goodwill. If you agree to transfer a small portion, 15% of shares into a joint trust called Caldwell Holdings, we guarantee financial support and reserve capital for expansion or IPO. I didn't touch the paper. Instead, I placed a thick, notarized folder on the table, turning it toward Marcus. This is confirmation from Fulton and Green Bank, from my grandmother Margaret Walsh's private counsel. It certifies that I am the sole beneficiary of the Walsh Legacy Trust, including all assets, investments, and legal rights tied to her estate. I flipped to the index, then to the page bearing Richard Lowen's signature and the co-supervisor's seal, letting Marcus see each stamp. In addition, I continued, this is a legal statement confirming forgery of my signature and unlawful use of my personal information in the Martha's Vineyard mortgage. If necessary, I will take this to civil court. Silence filled the room. Ryan's eyes darted. My father leaned back, his face hardening. Since when, he asked slowly, did you start seeing us as enemies in a business deal? This isn't a deal, I said. It's about dignity, about autonomy, About the line I will not let anyone cross. My mother's eyes searched mine, as if trying to recover some obedient version of her daughter still hidden inside. Zinnia, I hoped you would think of family before yourself. I am thinking of family, I answered. Just not by carrying debt, sacrificing, and staying silent while being manipulated. I stood, light from the windows casting across my face, reflecting in the eyes of everyone opposite me. I will not sign, not transfer, not compromise. And if anyone tries again, our next meeting won't be in a law office. It will be in court. I gathered my papers and walked out. The heavy door shut behind me with a sharp, final click. What I carried now wasn't anger, but a cold clarity like someone locking the last gate behind them. Not long after that confrontation, Aunt Caroline called. Her voice carried hesitation, but beneath it, a frankness I had always respected. Zinnia, this weekend, the family is gathering to commemorate your grandfather's 10-year passing. Everyone will be there. Your parents said they plan to announce matters concerning property. I think you should come. I hesitated for several breaths. Images flickered, phony handshakes, hollow congratulations, eyes avoiding mine like I held a truth no one wanted heard. I'll be there, I said quietly, but firmly. Sunday morning, I walked into the second-floor hall of the Langford Hotel where my father had once held his 60th birthday with nearly 100 guests. This time, fewer attended. Relatives sat scattered in clusters, eyes drawn toward the head table where my parents were already seated. Ryan stood beside them, hands in his pockets, his irritation plain. Perhaps because today wasn't his stage, my mother began with a few words about my grandfather, about family as roots, about a vision of unity everyone should embrace. It was clear they were building toward the real purpose. We wish to announce, my father said, his voice carrying through the microphone, that all property in Martha's Vineyard will be placed into the Caldwell Family Real Estate Fund. This fund will be managed directly by us, together with Ryan. I rose to my feet. My voice, even without a microphone, was sharp and clear. That property is currently under an unlawful mortgage with my forged signature attached to it. The murmurs in the hall died instantly, as if someone had slammed a switch. Aunt Ruth turned, her face paling. A cousin on my father's side exhaled audibly. Marcus, the lawyer brought to witness the fund's creation, shifted from professional detachment to wary alertness. Zinnia, my mother began, hand outstretched as if to calm. I told you this would be handled privately. No, I cut her off, voice steady. You lied, and now I will speak the truth. Here, in front of everyone. I opened the file Natalie had printed, handing it to Aunt Caroline to pass down the rows. These are records from the bank and an independent investigator, confirming every mortgage document in my name was signed with a forged signature in a deal I was never informed about. I stepped toward the podium, meeting the eyes of relatives I once thought I would never confront like this. Ryan, I said, you failed in 3 consecutive startups, burning through over $1.2 million from private investors. You created 4 shell companies in Delaware and Wyoming to funnel money from our parents' accounts, laundering debt and fabricating your financial history. Ryan yanked his hand from his pocket, snapping, "You don't know anything about investment. All you do is play the victim." "You're not a victim, Ryan," I said, unwavering. "You are the product of a system warped inside this house. You were raised to believe you deserve everything, even without building a single brick. And I have paid for every accomplishment of mine with silence, endurance, and at times, humiliation. All eyes were no longer on me, they turned to my parents. I may not care about the property," I continued, "but I care about the truth. Because it's the silence of everyone in this room over the years that has hurt the children who were told they were the responsible ones, the ones who could handle it." I'm not the only person who's ever been treated this way. The only difference is that today, I refuse to stay silent. Marcus stood and whispered something to my father. My father gave a slight nod, his face hardening. Ryan looked around, eyes darting as if searching for an escape. And I want to announce, I said, my tone still steady, that starting tomorrow, all oversight of the assets in the Walsh Legacy Trust, left by my grandmother, will be transferred to an independent institution. The Caldwell family will no longer have any rights tied to that trust. Ryan shoved his primer chair back, the scrape of leather against the floor echoing through the hall. He stormed toward the door without looking back. My mother lowered her head, clutching her silk scarf tightly. My father said nothing, his breath heavy, leaning back in his chair as though the weight of the meeting pressed against his chest. I left the podium and returned to my seat. No one stopped me. No one accused me. Some eyes turned away, but others gave small nods, faint glimmers of acknowledgement. The truth was no longer buried beneath sugar-coated lies. And I stood there, back straight, gripping the file in my hand not to defend myself anymore but to protect the peace I had spent my youth fighting for. 6 months after that family meeting, where the truth had been ripped open like a wound that could never be sewn shut, I stood on a round stage, lit by bright spotlights. Behind me, the familiar red letters read, TED. In front of me, over 500 people sat silent, most of them young, but many faces bore the years of experience to know that some battles in life don't erupt with gunfire, but with the silent stares of our own kin. I wore a simple white, high-collared blouse and black trousers. No jewelry, no necklace. Only one thing lay close to my heart. My grandmother Margaret's old silver brooch, pinned to my blouse exactly where she used to rest her hand on my chest when I cried as a child, feeling like I wasn't enough. Has anyone here, I began, my voice carrying evenly through the microphone, ever been the child sitting quietly at the side table during a family gathering, watching their sibling be lifted to the stage while their own name was never spoken? A few heads nodded. Someone dabbed their glasses with a tissue. I used to think that if I worked just a little harder, achieved just a little more, succeeded just a little further, one day I'd be allowed into the family portrait. But then I realized not every portrait is worth squeezing into. I told my story not with resentment, but with the calmness forged through years of pulling myself up after being shoved aside. I didn't hide the fact that Ryan had forged my signature. I didn't avoid the truth that my parents had used my name as a shield for their failures. I forgive, I said, my eyes sweeping the room, but I don't forget. And forgiveness doesn't mean I allow them to repeat it. Down front, Natalie sat with her hands folded, her eyes glowing as they always did when we pitched to investors. Richard was there too, tall and lean in a plain suit, nodding at moments as if he were quietly conversing with memory itself. Toward the end of my talk, I spoke about the Margaret Walsh Foundation, the scholarship fund I had established to support young people dismissed, overlooked, or forced to grow up sooner than they should have. Each scholarship is not just money, I said. It is recognition. You matter, even when no one in your home is willing to say it out loud. As I stepped off stage, a long wave of applause rose. I didn't bow deeply, only gave a small nod, resting my hand over my chest where my grandmother's brooch still shone quiet but steadfast, like the spirit she had left me. A few weeks after the TED Talk, I received an email from Ryan. Short, without excuses. Sis, I'm starting over. I enrolled in a night class on managerial accounting. Thank you for not exposing everything you could have. I didn't reply, but I carried the image of my younger brother, head in his hands at that meeting 6 months earlier whenever I reread those lines. It was not the image of a failure, but of someone seeing himself honestly in the mirror for the first time. My parents reached out too, scattered emails, occasional holiday cards with vague blessings. I didn't cut them off, but I no longer opened the door unconditionally. I hope you're both well, I wrote in the only email I sent back. I'm doing fine, and I hope we can learn how to coexist without hurting each other anymore. When spring came, I reopened the house in Vermont, the small home bought with the first portion of my grandmother's trust. This time, not as a refuge, but as a place to welcome people in. Natalie drove up with her husband. Richard arrived in the afternoon carrying a box of warm pastries. My whole development team showed up too, laptops under their arms, sandwiches, and laughter in tow. I cooked dinner, a rare habit I saved for the people I trusted. In the small kitchen, under the golden light, conversations flowed as hands passed dishes and the skillet sizzled. We set the table in the backyard. A long maple table stood between blooming lavender bushes, candles flickering inside glass jars. No one mentioned my parents. No one asked about Ryan, but that didn't mean they didn't understand. They understood more deeply than anyone who had lived under the same roof with me. I sat in the middle of the table not because I hosted, but because they had saved that seat for me. No one pushed me aside. No one looked through me. When I lifted my glass, they lifted theirs. There was no script, no performance. Only a quiet line from Natalie, floating through the spring night. Welcome Zinnia, the one who chose her own seat. I looked around the table at their eyes, their real smiles, their unspoken gratitude. And I knew clearly, family is not where we are born. Family is where people see us and never turn away. If you've ever sat at a table where you were forgotten, if you've ever been made to feel like the extra one in your own family, perhaps you'll understand what I felt that night when, for the first time, I was seen, heard, and most importantly, I no longer had to prove anything. I share this story not to cast blame, but to remind you, everyone has the right to redraw boundaries, to choose who their family is, and to build a life no longer dependent on half-hearted acceptance from others. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up for your own worth against the very people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? Have you ever had to choose between sacrificing yourself to preserve something called family or walking away to create a life kinder to yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I truly want to hear your story because maybe, just maybe, your experience will become someone else's source of strength. And if stories about healing, about boundaries, about the real struggles within family life resonate with you, don't forget to follow this channel. There are so many more stories, some of which may feel like your own, waiting to be told. Thank you for listening to my journey. And if you're in the middle of your own, remember, you are not alone.